There it is. Um, so for those of you who missed any part of testing, do make sure that you're checking your email, that you're not, ignoring phone calls from the school. They are trying to get in touch with you to set up makeup times. Makeups start as early as tomorrow for some of you. So be on top of that. Make sure you're paying attention. Okay. How was your weekend? Anything good happen? Much needed? Yeah. Okay. And how are we doing with Farewell to Manzanar? Are we caught up, or mostly almost there? Okay. So our goal is to finish it up, hopefully by the end of the week. Um, Tomorrow, not tomorrow, Wednesday, you're going to get our writing prompts, and you're going to get some choices. I think I've created 4 of them. But we're going to actually start a little bit of the legwork in terms of getting ready for that today. And there are some parts of the text that I want to kind of focus on today. And if you're not up to speed, we're going to be spoiling some of that. But it is 10:20 right now. Let me give you until 10:40 to just read, and then we'll dig into the text. If you're caught up to where you need to be, then go ahead and wrap it up, finish it up, and yeah, finish it up. Okay. So 10:40, we'll start talking. About 5 more minutes. About 2 more minutes of reading. So, what are our thoughts here? What are we thinking of Jean and what she's going through? This, these final chapters, this most recent chunk, up to whatever it was, 134, right? Um, or 164. Was it 164? It was 164. Has got me kind of in my own head a little bit. It's got me recognizing that so when I was in high school and in college and after college, I dated a girl who was mixed race. She was Filipino and Eastern European. And she never spoke to me about struggles that she really faced as a consequence of being mixed race. And with the exception of like a couple of moments in college, her last name was Garcia. And that is the consequence of the history of colonization that exists throughout Asia and Africa and so on and so forth. And so her last name, she's got a Spanish surname, but she did not look Hispanic. Her physical features were Asiatic. And I, as I'm reading through these last parts, I'm wondering if kind of her struggles, because she did, there was evidence of things that she was struggling with that she never spoke to me about. And Jean kind of addresses that in the final chunk of reading that I'm asking you to do. The very fact that she has never spoken to her husband about her prior experiences is an indication of that just kind of keeping things to ourselves. That frequently that is how we live our lives. We keep things to ourselves, but it's at the same time it's important to share our experiences with other people so that they can understand that sometimes what other people do to us is not right, that it's not fair, that it's not just. So those sorts of things. And there are lots of these moments in this last chunk that you're responsible for today that really had me thinking about some of her experiences. And they are experiences that some of you may be familiar with as well. If you are an individual who does not look like me, again, this is a matter of me pointing out the fact that I'm a white dude, and there are so many experiences that exist in this world, in this country, that I cannot imagine, that I have to begin to imagine, so that I can understand why my friends get upset about things that they get upset about, and that they have every right to get upset about some of the things that they get upset about. So I want to take a look at some of these moments. And those are just sort of my general thoughts. Do you have any general thoughts about Jean's years following the internment? So nobody's saying anything. So I assume we're okay. Let's take a look at page 142. So she's talking about this friend of hers, this little girl who becomes a friend of hers, who just said, gee, I didn't know you could speak English. So we pick up at the top of page 142. She was genuinely amazed. I was stunned. How could this have even been in doubt? And Jean has this why does Jean have the reaction that she has? Why is Jean so stunned? Why is it that Jean is stunned at that statement? Gee, I didn't know you could speak English. That'd be like somebody saying that to me. I think that's a big part of it. She knows that she's different because she's been in the camp, and so she's being treated differently. But now, one of her peers is treating her this way, or says this to her. How is that like somebody saying that to me? How would somebody? How is that possible? Who would say, "Gee, I didn't know you could speak English"? Why would that be the same thing as if they had said it to me? Where was Jean born and raised? There we go. Okay. It isn't difficult now to explain her reaction, but at age 11, I couldn't believe anyone could think such a thing, say such a thing about me, or regard me in that way. I smiled and sat down, suddenly aware of what being of Japanese ancestry was going to be like. I wouldn't be faced with physical attack or with overt shows of hatred. Rather, I would be seen as someone foreign, or as someone other than American, or perhaps not seen at all. During the years in camp, I had never really understood why we were there, nor had I questioned it much. I knew no one in my family had committed a crime. If I needed explanations at all, I conjured up vague notions about a war between America and Japan. But now I'd reached an age where certain childhood mysteries begin to make sense. This girl's guileless remark came as an illumination, an instant knowledge that brought with it the first buds of true shame. What is she ashamed of? You might mark that in your book. There's actually a prompt that deals with this. What could she possibly be ashamed of? From that day on, part of me yearned to be invisible. I want you to think about that for a minute, too. What does that mean? And I know many of you wish to feel that way, to not have any attention paid to you at all. That's why I'm looking at only 2 cameras. That's why I only have 2 cameras that are on right now, after all. The rest of us just kind of want to go about our business and not be bothered. We wish to be invisible. And not that my 2 cameras don't feel the same way, but there's something else that's driving them. In a way, nothing would have been nicer than for no one to see me. Although I couldn't have defined it at the time, I felt that if attention were drawn to me, people would see what this girl had first responded to. They wouldn't see me. They would see the slant-eyed face, the Asian. This is what accounts, in part, for the entire evacuation. You cannot deport 110,000 people unless you have stopped seeing individuals. Of course, for such a thing to happen, there has to be a kind of acquiescence on the part of the victims, some submerged belief that this treatment is deserved, or at least allowable. It's an attitude easy for non-whites to acquire in America. I had inherited it. Manzanar had confirmed it. And my feeling at 11 went something like this. You are going to be invisible anyway, so why not completely disappear? What's going on in that paragraph?
She feels like she doesn't fit in.
Absolutely. Other thoughts about that? How about this mistreatment? This idea of mistreatment? Does anyone deserve that kind of treatment?
No.
Then why does she feel like it's deserved? Again, you might mark that paragraph. But another part of me did not want to disappear. The same sort of reaction that sent Woody into the Army. I instinctively decided I would have to prove that I wasn't different, that it should not be odd to hear me speaking English. From that day forward, I lived with this double impulse, the urge to disappear and the desperate desire to be acceptable. Adolescence is bad enough, but to have to experience this at the same time. I soon learned that there were certain areas I was automatically allowed to perform in: scholarship, athletics, school time activities like the yearbook, the newspaper, and student government. I tried all of these and made good grades, became news editor, held an office in the girls' athletic league. I also learned that outside school, another set of rules prevailed. Choosing friends, for instance, often depended upon whether or not I could be invited to their homes, whether their parents would allow this. And what is so infuriating, looking back, is how I accepted the situation. If refused by someone's parents, I would never say, go to hell, or I'll find other friends, or who wants to come to your house anyway? I would see it as my fault. Again, there's that shame. The result of my failings. I was imposing a burden on them by her Asianness. I would absorb such rejections and keep on looking. Because for some reason, the Scholarship Society and the Athletic League and the yearbook staff didn't satisfy me, were never quite enough. They were too limited, or too easy, or too obvious. I wanted to declare myself in some different way, and old enough to be marked by the internment, but still too young for the full impact of it to cow me. I wanted in. She wants to be accepted. None of us want to be rejected. We all want to be liked. At one point, I thought I would like to join the Girl Scouts. A friend of mine belonged, that blonde girl who had commented on my reading. Her name was Radine. Her folks had come west from Amarillo, Texas, and made a little money in the aircraft plants, but not enough yet to get out of Cabrillo homes. We found ourselves walking partway home together every day. Her fascination with my ability to speak English had led to many other topics, but she had never mentioned the Girl Scouts to me. One day, I did. Can I belong? I asked, then adding as an afterthought, as if to ease what I knew her answer would have to be. You know, I'm Japanese. Gee, she said, her friendly face suddenly a mask. I don't know, but we can sure find out. Mama's the assistant troop leader. And then the next day, gee, Jeannie, no, really sorry. Rage may have been simmering deep within me, but my conscious reaction was, oh, well, that's okay, Radine. I understand. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Sure, I'll meet you at the stoplight. What do you make of that? How do we respond to that? What do we think of that? Again, I would propose that adolescence is bad enough. You know, and it's not that she can't join Girl Scouts, she just can't join Girl Scouts with her friend. She would have to be in a segregated troop. She did, after all, indicate that the camp, Manzanar, had Girl Scout troop. Any thoughts on that? Definitely mark those pages. Turn to 146. Four lines from the top of the page. She's been made lead majorette. In the center between Radine and Gloria, another girl from the 7th grade. 7th grade. 7th grade. Those two wore blue satin outfits to accent their bright blonde hair. My outfit was white with gold braid across the chest. We all wore white, calf-high boots, and boat-shaped hats. We worked out trio routines and practiced every weekend with the boys, marching up and down the streets of the project. We performed with them at our junior high assemblies, as well as in the big band reviews each spring, with our batons glinting out in front of the bass drums and snares and shiny bugles, their banners, merit badges, khaki uniforms, and their squared-off military footwork. This was exactly what I wanted. It also gave me the first sure sign of how certain intangible barriers might be crossed. So I want you to be thinking about how this intangible barrier might be crossed. The Girl Scouts was much like a sorority, of the kind I would be excluded from in high school and later on in college. And it was run by mothers. The Boy Scouts was like a fraternity and run by fathers. Radine and I were both maturing early. The boys in the band loved having us out there in front of them all the time, bending back and stepping high in our snug satin outfits and short skirts. Their dads, mostly Navy men, loved it too. At that age, I was too young to consciously use my sexuality or to understand how an Asian female can fascinate Caucasian men, and of course, far too young to see that even this is usually just another form of invisibility. It simply happened that the attention I first gained as a majorette went hand in hand with a warm reception from the Boy Scouts and their fathers. And from that point on, I knew intuitively that one resource I had to overcome the war-distorted limitations of my race would be my femininity. Oh, that's creepy. At 7th grade, what's going on? Why is she accepted in that particular role? How is it that she's invisible? Have you changed your mind? Or are you still typing? Right. That's exactly right. She's being sexualized. At 13 years old, 12, 13 years old. That's 7th grade. 12, 13 years old. That's awful. And she's becoming an object because of her otherness. Take a look at page 149. So you might mark that passage. Page 149. And this is a part of adolescence as well. Ever more vulnerable, and so this is middle of the page, top of the first full paragraph. Ever more vulnerable, Papa began drinking heavily again. And I would watch it with sorrow and disgust, unable then to imagine what he was going through, too far into my own junior high school survival. And so there's this recognition that her father is experiencing things that that she cannot relate to because she's too caught up in her own adolescence and dramas and traumas, but does have the capacity through hindsight to recognize that her father struggled as well. Um, Page 150 and 151, that last paragraph, again, that might be something worth kind of marking. I was standing at the head of the table, shaking the principal's hand when Papa rose, his face ceremoniously grave, and acknowledged the other parents with his most respectful gesture. He pressed his palms together at his chest and gave them a slow, deep Japanese bow from the waist. They received this with a moment of careful, indecisive silence. He was unforgivably a foreigner then, foreign to them, foreign to me, foreign to everyone but Mama, who sat next to him smiling with pleased modesty. 12 years old at the time, I wanted to scream. I wanted to slide out of sight under the table and dissolve. And so there's a real struggle with kind of bridging the distance between her Americanness and her Japaneseness, if that makes sense. And you know has lost a sense of kind of who she is as she's trying to struggle through adolescence. I think that's a big part of adolescence, period. But you know that contributes largely to it. Take a look at page 153. And again, so this idea of shame from the beginning of these passages that we've been looking at, the whole paragraph on page 153, the band teacher knew I had more experience than anyone else competing that year. He told me so, but he was afraid to use me. He had to go to speak to the school board about it and to some of the parents to see if it was allowable for an Asian to represent the high school in such a visible way. It had never happened before. I was told that this inquiry was being made, and my reaction was the same as when I tried to join the Girl Scouts. I was apologetic for imposing such a burden on those who had to decide. When they finally assented, I was grateful. After all, I was the first Asian majorette they'd ever had. Even if my once enviable role now seemed vaguely second rate, still I determined to try twice as hard to prove they'd made the right choice. What's going on in that paragraph? What's happening there? Absolutely. Why does she feel like she has to apologize? what does that then do to her? Because she's not doing anything wrong, right? Ultimately, what's the issue? Just these, think about the times that you have been embarrassed or ashamed, and start to think about, how this is all about who she is. And she has nothing to be ashamed of who she is. She can't help that at all. It's simply, it can't be helped. It is who she is. And then we get this interesting business. And again, so this takes us back to the fathers of the Boy Scouts. Page 156. 3 lines from the top of the page. By the spring of that year, when it came time to elect the annual carnival queen from the graduating seniors, my homeroom chose me. I was among 15 girls nominated to walk out for inspection by the assembled student body on voting day. I knew I couldn't beat the other contestants at their own game, that is, look like a bobby soxer. Yet neither could I look too Japanesey. I decided to go exotic. With a flower print sarong, black hair loose, and a hibiscus flower behind my ear. When I walked barefooted out onto the varnished gymnasium floor between the filled bleachers, the howls and whistles from the boys were double what had greeted any of the other girls. It sounded like some winning basket had just been made in the game against our oldest rivals. It was pretty clear what the outcome would be, but ballots still had to be cast and counted. And so why are they voting for her, and why does she feel the obligation or the need to dress in that way? She didn't want to look too Japanesey, but what does she do? How much of that is about adolescence? How much of it is trying to figure out who she is? We've only got a few minutes left, and I want to look at these other pages, but I think we're going to hold off on them. There is an assignment in our agenda that I just kind of need to modify because of the time that we've got left. And so I'm going to make it, it's a homework assignment that I'm going to give you for Wednesday rather than by the end of the block. So we need to still look at 161, 162, and then 163 and 164. So we're going to close out with a look at George Takei. And so don't worry about the assignment thing or the article that's linked at the bottom, this race and the war. You're not going to worry about those. You're not going to do anything with those. So don't worry about assignments or just going to watch a TED Talk right now. Okay. So let me go ahead and turn off your cameras for those of you, the two of you who have yours on. I will do the same and mute myself, and we'll take a look at another individual who experienced the internment camps.
I'm a veteran of the Starship Enterprise. I soared through the galaxy, driving a huge starship with a crew made up of people from all over this world. Many different races, many different cultures, many different heritages, all working together. And our mission was to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Well, I am the grandson of immigrants from Japan who went to America, boldly going to a strange new world, seeking new opportunities. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. They met and married in Los Angeles, and I was born there. I was 4 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, 1941 by Japan. And overnight, the world was plunged into a world war. America suddenly was swept up by hysteria. Japanese Americans, American citizens of Japanese ancestry, were looked on with suspicion and fear and with outright hatred, simply because we happened to look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And the hysteria grew and grew until on February 1942, the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, ordered all Japanese Americans on the west coast of America to be summarily rounded up with no charges, with no trial, with no due process. Due process is the core pillar of our justice system. That all disappeared. We were to be rounded up and imprisoned in 10 barbed wire prison camps in some of the most desolate places in America. The blistering hot desert of Arizona, the sultry swamps of Arkansas, the wastelands of Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and 2 of the most desolate places in California. On April 20th, I celebrated my 5th birthday. And just a few weeks after my birthday, my parents got my younger brother, my baby sister, and me up very early one morning, and they dressed us hurriedly. My brother and I were in the living room looking out the front window, and we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried bayonets on their rifle. They stomped up the front porch and banged on the door. My father answered it, and these soldiers ordered us out of our home. My father gave my brother and me small luggages to carry, and we walked out and stood on the driveway waiting for our mother to come out. And when my mother finally came out, she had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down both her cheeks. I will never be able to forget that scene. It is burned into my memory. We were taken from our home and loaded onto train cars with other Japanese American families. There were guards stationed at both ends of each car, as if we were criminals. We were taken 2/3 of the way across the country, rocking on that train for 4 days and 3 nights to the swamps of Arkansas. I still remember the barbed wire fence that confined me. I remember the tall sentry tower with the machine guns pointed at us. I remember the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs from my barrack to the latrine. But to 5-year-old me, I thought it was kind of nice that they lit the way for me to pee. I was a child, too young to understand the circumstances of my being there. Children are amazingly adaptable. What would be grotesquely abnormal became my normality in the prisoner of war camps. It became routine for me to line up 3 times a day to eat lousy food in a noisy mess hall. It became normal for me to go with my father to bathe in a mass shower. Being in a prison, a barbed wire prison camp, became my normality. When the war ended, we were released and given a one-way ticket to anywhere in the United States. My parents decided to go back home to Los Angeles. But Los Angeles was not a welcoming place. We were penniless. Everything had been taken from us, and the hostility was intense. Our first home was on Skid Row, in the lowest part of our city, living with derelicts, drunkards, and crazy people. The stench of urine all over, on the street, in the alley, in the hallway. It was a horrible experience, and for us kids, it was terrorizing. I remember once a drunkard came staggering down, fell down right in front of us, and threw up. My baby sister said, "Mama, let's go back home," because behind barbed wires was, for us, home. My parents worked hard to get back on their feet. We'd lost everything. They were at the middle of their lives and starting all over. They worked their fingers to the bone, and ultimately, they were able to get the capital together to buy a 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood. And I was a teenager, and I became very curious about my childhood imprisonment. I'd read civics books that told me about the ideals of American democracy. All men are created equal. We have inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I couldn't quite make that fit with what I knew to be my childhood imprisonment. I read history books, and I couldn't find anything about it. And so I engaged my father after dinner in long, sometimes heated conversations. We had many, many conversations like that. And what I got from them was my father's wisdom. He was the one that suffered the most under those conditions of imprisonment, and yet he understood American democracy. He told me that our democracy is a people's democracy, and it can be as great as the people can be, but it is also as fallible as people are. He told me that American democracy is vitally dependent on good people who cherish the ideals of our system and actively engage in the process of making our democracy work. And he took me to a campaign headquarters. The governor of Illinois was running for the presidency and introduced me to American electoral politics. And he also told me about young Japanese Americans during the Second World War. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, young Japanese Americans, like all young Americans, rushed to their draft board to volunteer to fight for our country. That act of patriotism was answered with a slap in the face. We were denied service and categorized as enemy, non-alien. It was outrageous to be called an enemy when you're volunteering to fight for your country. But that was compounded with the word non-alien, which is a word that means citizen in the negative. They even took the word citizen away from us and imprisoned them for a whole year. And then the government realized that there is a wartime manpower shortage. And as suddenly as they rounded us up, they opened up the military for service by young Japanese Americans. It was totally irrational. But the amazing thing, the astounding thing, is that thousands of young Japanese American men and women again went from behind those barbed wire fences, put on the same uniform as that of our guards, leaving their families in imprisonment to fight for this country. They said that they were going to fight not only to get their families out from behind those barbed wire fences, but because they cherished the very ideal of what our government stands for, should stand for, and that was being abrogated by what was being done. All men are created equal, and they went to fight for this country. They were put into a segregated all-Japanese American unit and sent to the battlefields of Europe. And they threw themselves into it. They fought with amazing, incredible courage and valor. They were sent out on the most dangerous missions, and they sustained the highest combat casualty rate of any unit proportionally. There's one battle that illustrates that. It was a battle for the Gothic Line. The Germans were embedded in this mountain hillside, rocky hillside, in impregnable caves. And 3 Allied battalions had been pounding away at it for 6 months, and they were stalemated. The 442nd was called in to add to the fight. But the men of the 442nd came up with a unique but dangerous idea. The backside of the mountain was a sheer rock cliff. The Germans thought an attack from the backside would be impossible. The men of the 442nd decided to do the impossible. On a dark, moonless night, they began scaling that rock wall, a drop of more than 1,000 feet, in full combat gear. They climbed all night long on that sheer cliff. In the darkness, some lost their handhold or their footing, and they fell to their death in the ravine below. They all fell silently. Not a single one cried out so as not to give their position away. The men climbed for 8 hours straight, and those who made it to the top stayed there until the first break of light. And as soon as light broke, they attacked. The Germans were surprised, and they took the hill and broke the Gothic line. A 6-month stalemate was broken by the 442nd in 32 minutes. It was an amazing act. And when the war ended, the 442nd returned to the United States as the most decorated unit of the entire Second World War. They were greeted back on the White House lawn by President Truman, who said to them, "You fought not only the enemy, but prejudice, and you won." They are my heroes. They clung to their belief in the shining ideals of this country, and they proved that being an American is not just for some people, that race is not how we define being an American. They expanded what it means to be an American, including Japanese Americans that were feared and suspected and hated. They were change agents, and they left for me a legacy. They are my heroes, and my father is my hero, who understood democracy and guided me through it. They gave me a legacy, and with that legacy comes a responsibility. And I am dedicated to making my country an even better America, to making our government an even truer democracy. And because of the heroes that I have and the struggles that we've gone through, I can stand before you as a gay Japanese American, but even more than that, I am a proud American. Thank you very much.
So those are some ideas that we're going to be pursuing, certainly in the coming weeks, as you're writing, but also as we read our next book as well. You know, what is going on with us right now, and applying a lot of the lessons that are coming from Farewell to Manzanar to our present moment. We do have another book that's coming, and hopefully you picked up Fences while you were here last week. If you didn't, Fences is still available in the IMC, and I would request that you get a copy of it soon. We're going to start reading it, probably after, maybe late next week. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have a copy. Stay tuned. I will kind of make some edits to our agenda if you've got any questions about what you need to do. And that's it. Okay. Have a great Monday. I'll see you on Wednesday.